On June 21, 2025, the world awoke to a new reality, one that would reshape the global landscape for years to come. The early morning hours were pierced by breaking news alerts, as millions around the globe watched in disbelief, glued to their screens trying to comprehend the magnitude of what was unfolding. The United States and Israel had launched a massive, coordinated assault on Iran's nuclear program in a top-secret operation codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer. The attack was meticulously planned, targeting key facilities deep within Iranian territory, including the heavily fortified Fordow fuel enrichment plant. President Trump's sudden announcement from the White House sent shockwaves across the globe. In a somber address, he confirmed that over 125 advanced aircraft, including stealth bombers and drones, had struck multiple Iranian nuclear sites in a matter of hours, marking one of the largest air operations in recent history. Tehran erupted in chaos. Sirens blared through the night, explosions shattered the city's uneasy silence, and terrified citizens scrambled for safety in the darkness. The capital's skyline was lit by fire and smoke, as emergency services rushed to respond to the devastation. In Washington, lawmakers were blindsided by the sudden escalation. Many questioned the legality and wisdom of an attack authorized without congressional consent, sparking heated debates and urgent meetings in the halls of Congress. This was the most direct U.S.-Iran military confrontation in over 40 years, instantly pushing the already volatile Middle East to the brink of a wider regional war. Tensions soared as both nations mobilized their forces and neighboring countries braced for possible retaliation. The operation came after a week of escalating violence between Israel and Iran, with missile exchanges and covert attacks. But the direct involvement of the United States raised the stakes to an unprecedented level, leaving the world anxious about the potential for further escalation. As dawn broke over a battered landscape, the world was left with urgent questions. What exactly had been destroyed? How would Iran respond to this bold strike? And most importantly, what would come next in this rapidly unfolding crisis? The global order felt suddenly fragile. As world leaders scrambled to respond, financial markets plunged and ordinary people everywhere sensed the world was standing on a knife's edge, awaiting the next move in a deadly and unpredictable game. The Trump administration justified Operation Midnight Hammer as a last resort to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Years of failed diplomacy and growing alarm over Iran's nuclear progress led to a decision for decisive military action. The strikes targeted Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, facilities at the core of Iran's nuclear ambitions. The goal: cripple Iran's nuclear program, force it back to negotiations, and avoid a wider war or regime change. U.S. officials insisted the operation targeted only nuclear infrastructure, not the Iranian people or government. Critics argued the attack was reckless, risked unifying Iran against the U.S., and could provoke fierce retaliation. The world now watched the consequences of a monumental gamble unfold. Operation Midnight Hammer showcased the full might of modern U.S. military power. B-2 Spirit stealth bombers flew from Missouri and Guam, dropping GBU-57 bunker busters on the deeply buried Fordow facility. 14 of these massive bombs penetrated the mountain, targeting Iran's most secure nuclear site. Simultaneously, U.S. Navy submarines launched Tomahawk cruise missiles at Natanz and Isfahan, overwhelming Iranian air defenses. Decoy jets and electronic warfare aircraft jammed Iranian radar, ensuring the strike force's safe return. The operation was executed flawlessly. No U.S. or Israeli aircraft were lost. The attack demonstrated the technological gap between the U.S. and its adversaries. It was a textbook example of network-centric warfare: speed, precision, and overwhelming force. The world took note. No target was beyond America's reach. While U.S. officials hailed the operation as a strategic success, the reality on the ground in Iran was one of devastation, heartbreak, and overwhelming loss. For ordinary Iranians, the aftermath was not a moment of triumph, but a nightmarish ordeal that would haunt families and communities for years to come. Over 600 Iranians lost their lives, and more than 1,300 were injured in the immediate aftermath of the strikes. Hospitals overflowed with the wounded, and medical staff worked tirelessly through the chaos, often with limited supplies and under the constant threat of further attacks. Civilian casualties were unavoidable, especially near Isfahan, where entire neighborhoods were shattered. The shockwaves of the strikes rippled through nearby communities, forcing families to flee their homes in the dead of night, carrying only what they could. Satellite images revealed massive craters at the Fordow nuclear site, and Isfahan centrifuge workshop was reduced to twisted metal and debris. The scale of destruction was visible from space, a stark reminder of the operation's intensity. The IAEA confirmed there were no radioactive leaks, but Iran's nuclear infrastructure suffered severe, long-term damage. Emergency workers scrambled to secure the sites while the world watched anxiously for any sign of nuclear fallout. Panic spread rapidly. Mass evacuations swept through city streets, internet blackouts left millions cut off from loved ones, and fear of further attacks gripped the nation. Families huddled in basements, uncertain if the worst was yet to come. The strikes triggered a humanitarian crisis, compounding Iran's existing struggles with shortages of food, medicine, and shelter. Aid workers rushed to distribute supplies, but the need far outpaced the resources available. In retaliation, Iran launched missiles at Israeli cities, killing 24 and injuring over 1,200 since the conflict began. The violence quickly crossed borders, drawing civilians in both countries into the heart of the conflict. The cycle of violence escalated, each strike fueling the next as fear and anger mounted on both sides. The devastation was no longer confined to military targets, it was now a shared tragedy for countless families. Both nations were pulled deeper into a vortex of war with no clear end in sight. The human cost continued to rise, leaving scars that would last for generations. Escalation, but bracing for more conflict. The world stands at a crossroads. Nations and leaders everywhere are watching with bated breath, aware that the decisions made in the coming days could reshape the global order for years to come. Washington and Tehran must now choose between escalation and a fragile peace, each side weighing the costs and consequences of their next move. Iran's options are stark: direct military retaliation, disrupting global oil supplies by closing the Strait of Hormuz, or launching asymmetric warfare through cyber attacks and regional proxies, each path carrying its own risks and uncertainties. For the US, the diplomatic window is critical. There is a narrow chance to de-escalate, but it requires restraint and careful negotiation. Any Iranian retaliation could trigger a far broader conflict, drawing in allies and adversaries alike, and potentially igniting a regional war. Alternatively, if Iran refrains and chooses dialogue, the US must decide whether to pursue genuine diplomacy or maintain the pressure of sanctions and threats, a choice that will shape the future of relations. A European-mediated ceasefire is possible, with international actors eager to prevent further bloodshed and economic turmoil, but deep mistrust and years of hostility make compromise difficult, and every word at the table is scrutinized. The region is more unstable than ever, with civilians bracing for the unknown and leaders under immense pressure. The risk of major war looms, threatening to engulf not just Iran and the US, but the entire Middle East. The coming days will be decisive. Every hour brings new developments, and the world waits for a sign of either escalation or hope. Every move is watched, analyzed, and debated, as leaders and citizens alike search for clarity in a time of uncertainty. The true legacy of Operation Midnight Hammer will be written by the choices made now, by the courage to seek peace, or the willingness to risk everything, not the bombs dropped that night, but the path chosen in the aftermath.